Bridie Latona is a multi-award winning actress and filmmaker, known for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Ford vs. Ferrari, and Timeless Eye. She holds a degree in acting and has studied at the Actors Studio under Elizabeth Kemp. She was awarded Best Actress at London's Rob Knox Film Festival and Best Actress at the Warner Brothers New Filmmakers Awards. Bridie Latona, thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
You've been pretty busy lately, and you've been in some really amazing projects starring some incredible talent. What is it like being on that kind of set?
Well, it's very exciting. I think it depends on the director because they sort of set the tone over the whole project. So if they're in a good mood, then everyone's in a good mood.
And if they're not in a good mood,
it's amazing how it like filters down. But luckily, I've worked with some amazing people who create a really good atmosphere. And it's just really exciting. But you sort of realize it's the same structure as a smaller project. There's cameras, it's the same, it's just more trailers and more money. And
right. Is there a different sort of energy on that as opposed to a smaller set?
Like I said, it really depends on the director and the people. Like it's sort of, it's like a different party has a different atmosphere. It's like, depends on that dynamic of people. So, it depends how the tone has been set.
There's often a lot of downtime on set and during rehearsal, whatnot. How do you fill that time?
Well, there's usually great snacks.
Does that also depend on the size of the project to work in on better snacks?
And, amazing people. Like, there's a lot of humor on set. Like, it's like the hurry up and wait thing. So it's like, everyone hurry up and get here and be here. And then it's like, wait for 3 hours and entertain yourself. And so it's surprisingly relaxed, a lot of it. Probably not if you're the producer or the director, but but yeah, there's a lot of waiting and a lot of humor, a lot of in jokes and at start. And
well, I would imagine there would have to be, a lot of the human just relax because you can't be on 24/7. You know what I mean? You'd have to take a breath every now and then especially if you're playing a fairly intense role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the funny thing is the darker the film, the more humor there is, and the funnier it gets. Like to sort of counteract that.
Right.
Often in comedies, it's like more serious. Like people are like, it's got to be funny. This pressure to be funny.
Right.
But often if it's darker, it's like cut, and you're like, I suppose like they do in hospitals, they find a lot of doctors say there's some dark humor that goes on to counteract the intensity of it.
Right. Well, speaking of directors and directing, now am I correct in thinking that you've done some directing yourself?
Yeah.
Is that something that you are interested in pursuing in the future?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How does it compare to acting, or can you even compare the two?
Directing is actually kind of lonelier because it's just you. There's just there's one director, and with acting, there's sort of the other actors that you connect with. Like the crew sort of has their people, and the actors have their people. And if you're the director, it's like it's just you. That's what I was surprised to find when I was directing. But I just love the creative process of directing. When I was acting, I found myself wanting to go into the editing room and wanting to be like, so what's happening next? I don't want to just wanting to find out about, the grading and the music and not wanting to let it go and wanting to edit the script and, so yeah, that's how I sort of got into directing.
Fantastic. So what was the last project that you directed?
I directed a short film That was sort of about the healing power of music with grief.
No, that sounds interesting.
Mm.
The biggest risk you've taken in your life or career thus far?
The biggest risk, I guess, moving to America perhaps is like, changing your whole life is a pretty big risk, but it's also paying off. So,
Sure.
and it's also, it's very exciting to live abroad, and so moving your whole life.
Yeah, well, yes, I can't even imagine how challenging that would be, and terrifying. I would be terrified anyway, especially, they're kind of related cultures, but at the same time, it's different, so it's almost odd that the similarities and the differences kind of overlap in a way, I would imagine, to make it sort of almost a little surreal until you get your sea legs, so to speak, about you.
Yeah, I find life pretty surreal anyway.
Yeah. I think most of us creatives do, though.
So you may as well just live in La La Land, make it more surreal.
Right.
Yeah, we are living on a big rock,
Right.
Space,
That's
advanced monkeys. So
that is true. There have been days I look around and like, this is weird. Like just the things we do. It's just whenever you step back and view something, it's just
why are we walking around like this is normal?
Yes, I had a friend, and one of our pastime was to describe like mundane everyday things dispassionately. Like we would do like football. Like we have two grown men throwing a inflated piece of leather back and forth. It just makes no sense. Why are we doing that? And yet millions of people are in.
When I watch sport, I often think that. I'm like,
why is this a thing?
It's amazing.
It's funny. What accomplishment are you most proud of thus far?
Most proud of. Well, it's the script that hasn't actually come out yet. I think. So I've been working for a long time on a feature.
The one that you've written or are writing? Okay.
I'm right. Yeah, I've nearly finished, and it's kind of been bubbling away in the background for a few years, and living in my imagination. So, I feel like when that gets made, I feel like that will be a big achievement.
Absolutely, yes, it certainly would be. Now, I don't want any spoilers. Can you tell us anything about it, or would you rather keep that close to the vest?
It's okay. It's about dreams, and it's sort of like an adult fairy tale.
Oh, interesting.
And, it's sort of, why do kids get all the fun to have all the fairy tales? We need some adult fairy tales and fantasy.
Speaking of dark humor, though, if you read or at least learn some of the history behind the Grimm's fairy tales, those are pretty dark. Those are dark. Crazy dark.
They're not for kids.
It's like, why am I reading this to my 4-year-old? Oh my lord!
They turned it down for Disney for sure.
Right.
Mine's not so dark. Mine's like, mine's a romance, and it's more hopeful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's so much dark stuff being made at the moment. I sort of want to make something that's a little like deep, but more lighter.
Sure. In the industry, what is one thing that you love about it, and then one thing that perhaps you could do without?
I just love how it brings together creative people, like musicians. It's just like editors. It's a mix of every creative profession that you can think of, and set designers. It's just such a collaborative effort, and technical people, cameramen. It's just so varied.
Yeah.
And I just think that's fascinating. And I guess what I could do without, which is actually changing a lot now, which was like just the sexism, I guess, like that used to be more like that you feel like you have to be this like sex symbol when you're like, I studied Shakespeare, right? Like,
Right.
you know, I'm not here to titillate you, you know, like I'm here to tell a story. And then when I graduated from drama school, I got a bit of a shock when it was like how often I was asked to just, you know, come to audition, you know, just as a to look a certain way, and it was all about my looks, and it was like, well, don't you care about my brain or my soul, or like,
right.
And I think that's changing a lot. I think that's
Good.
like, you know, and there's more female directors, and I think that when you only get a male perspective in the film industry, it's very strange not to hear from half the population about how they see life.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a good thing, and you know, with the variances between male and female, in my experience, for example, you know, I'm a writer by trade, and so in my field, some of the best books with the best characterizations are written by women, and I think it's because they have this, like, I don't want to characterize, but they seem to have this more intuitive, empathic ability to identify with a character that's not like them. And I think a lot of the men authors I read, male authors, have a more difficult time doing that. And I think that is why you see, both in books and in movies, why you see so many of the main characters who resemble, say, the director in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because that's who they identify with. They have a hard time breaking out of that box somehow. So, yeah, no, I'm glad to hear it's changing.
Are able to do it. Like sometimes you read novels or about females written by men, and you're surprised. You're like, how do you know this stuff?
Right.
Like, I really value that, and they must have a lot of empathy, because I think it's just generally empathy in our culture is something that we need to develop. There's a lot of narcissism, and it's sort of that's encouraged. And I think from children, I think we need to develop more empathy generally, and you know, in our stories, and we learn so much from our stories, from films and books, and so yeah, it's the more empathy we can develop through stories, I think our culture will benefit.
Sure. I mean, and I think the arts play such an important role in that, because you know, right now we're dealing with kind of a division between, in schools, like the STEM and arts, and a lot of attention is being placed on STEM because that's where the higher paying jobs go to and all this stuff. But sometimes I fear that we do focus on that at the expense of the arts, acting, music, literature, and in those types of things, the humanities. That's where we learn about humanity. And I do worry that we're losing a bit of that sometimes, but
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's so important, and it's a shame to brush that aside as less important or less well paid, or you know.
Right. I interviewed somebody a couple of weeks ago, and their husband is a musician or composer, and he was asked by the local school system to compose a musical about the importance of the STEM subjects. And I was like, if that's not irony, then I don't know what. As I told the person, it's sort of like training somebody to take your job. Yeah. You know? It's just sort of rude, but
selling yourself out.
Right. So apart from the script that you're working on, which sounds amazing, is there anything else that you're working on right now that we can look forward to from you that's not protected by some sort of NDA agreement?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, I'm not sure how much I can say. I hope he doesn't ask me something. I haven't been told what I can or can't say, so I should probably just say nothing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I'm really Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was just so much fun, and that was like probably the most fun I've ever had on a set. So I hope when I saw the trailer, I was like, that really comes across in the trailer. It was just so much. Everyone was just having so much fun, and Tarantino is just like such a light, such a joy, and just made everything fun, and I think that's a sign of a great director, to just to set that tone, and that's what comes across. That's what you feel when you're in the cinema. And
what is your favorite part about acting?
Well, I've always loved stories and getting lost in a story and history and thinking about how life used to be and different cultures and putting myself in a totally different life. And the wonderful thing about acting is you're not just reading it and you're not just watching it. You're in that costume and you're seeing like what life was like in 1960s Hollywood.
Right.
And it's very different being in that costume and being in that set and speaking in the way that they used to speak and learning about that. To me, that's fascinating. And the fact that you could get offered a role in any different era from any time period, it just keeps it interesting. It's like, it's just very exciting to be in the story and be like emotionally in the story rather than just learning about dates and history or, just like, it's like, no, you're living it. And that's why I do a lot of period dramas. And most of the films I've done have been like of a different era.
Right.
And, I've sort of always been fascinated with how people lived in different times.
Has there ever been a time, like when you're acting a role, when you sort of have lost track of the fact that you're on a set, like you're so into it?
I don't think. I think there's something interesting about an actor's brain. You can kind of, it's like you switch off. You have to sort of switch off the reality, but you also have to have part of your brain that has to hit your mark and know where the camera is, and you can't just like run off into a field in character like you're in a film. So there's always a part of your brain that like is aware of the camera and like where it is. So it's like it's a weird thing where you can sort of lose yourself to a certain extent, but then be like, okay, I have to go over there and technically hit that mark, otherwise they're not going to be able to focus on me.
Right. Yeah, this isn't improv.
Yeah.
Just the image of you just suddenly running off set into a field.
I don't see where that came from. It's just like,
where are you going?
We're really feeling it.
I'm being chased. It's not real. That's funny. Yeah. Well, Bridie Latona, thanks so much for coming on the Games and Writers Show. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. It was so much fun. Thank you.
Absolutely.